Good morning. We have general questions. Question number 1, Alex Ferguson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with NHS Dumfries-and-Galloway to ensure that strong and effective governance remains in place until new board members are appointed.
Cabinet Secretary Alex Neil.
Presiding Officer, further to my answer to Mr Ferguson's question on the 11th of December 2013, I can confirm that NHS Dumfries-and-Galloway have put arrangements in place to ensure they have strong and effective governance until the new board members are appointed. The member will wish to note that the recruitment of 4 new non-executives and a new chair onto the board of NHS Dumfries-and-Galloway will begin in the near future, and the governance arrangements that have been put in place will be kept under review throughout this process.
Alex Ferguson.
Well, I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for that reply, and indeed further to the answer that he gave me some weeks ago. I've spoken to a number of elected board members, none of whom expected the pilot scheme to be extended. What they did expect was to be able to see out the full term of office to which they were elected. The statutory evaluation of the experimental boards was published a year ago, but did not recommend any early abandonment of the pilot scheme. So may I ask why the Cabinet Secretary chose to so abruptly terminate their employment, the employment of the elected board members, effectively sacking them, when he could have given them 6 months' notice by simply announcing that the pilots would not be extended beyond their agreed date?
Cabinet Secretary.
Officer, if the member checks the terms of the legislation that was passed, I am required to act the way I did, given the timetable that's required in terms of intimating whether or not we're going to extend this pilot throughout the whole of Scotland. So under the legislation, I don't believe I had any choice but to do what I did do to meet the terms of the legislation.
Question number 2, Elaine Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what importance it places on the provision of low vision aids.
Minister Michael Matheson.
The Scottish Government recognises the benefit of low vision aids for those who need them, and values the work of local authorities, NHS boards and others in providing access to these.
Elaine Smith, and then I'm going to call Dennis Robertson for a supplementary. Elaine Smith.
Thank you, and I thank the Minister for his answer. Presiding Officer, whilst the arrangements for community optometry seem to be working well, does the Minister recall that one of the original aims of the scheme was to provide rapid and uncomplicated access to low vision equipment, as that can help people to live independently? And since I'm advised by local optometrists that they cannot begin to meet the demands for these low vision aids within the current funding structure, could the Minister comment on how this situation might be improved so that my constituents and others can enjoy an enhanced quality of life?
Minister.
Well, I'm aware that across boards in Scotland that they have arrangements in place to make sure that they are working in partnership with local optometrists and also with voluntary organisations and local authorities to make low vision aids available, and all boards have services in place. Within NHS Lanarkshire area, they have a shared care arrangement with local optometrists, a range of local optometrists, to be able to provide these low vision aids. I am aware that there has been significant pressure on this service within the NHS Lanarkshire area, which has been above what NHS Lanarkshire were planning for, and they've engaged with local optometrists in order to adjust the activity, in order to allow them to bulk purchase more equipment, and in order to do that, they've provided an extra £20,000 to this year's budget in order to bring in more equipment to be able to be available to local members within, to local constituents within the Lanarkshire area. However, if the member continues to experience particular difficulties for some of our constituents, if she wishes to raise that with me in writing, I'd be more than happy to make sure that NHS Lanarkshire look into the matter more thoroughly.
Dennis Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Is the Minister content that the level of functional vision training is being carried out at a national level to ensure that people with severe sight loss are maximising their remaining vision?
Minister.
I'm aware that it's extremely important to make sure that those patients who do have low vision are able to maximise their remaining vision. The vast majority of the functional vision training is provided in a specialist way, largely by the voluntary sector, working in partnership with NHS Scotland and also local authorities. I'm also conscious that there can be variations in its availability in different parts of the country, depending on the provision that's available from the voluntary sector. However, if the member has specific examples of where he believes that there is a need for further improvements on functional vision training to be provided, I'd be more than happy to meet with them and to discuss how we can achieve that more effectively.
Question 3, Paul Martin.
To ask the Scottish Government how many of the 33 recommendations in the Justice 2 Subcommittee's report have been implemented since May 2007.
Cabinet Secretary Kenny McCaskill.
Scotland has in place a strong legislative framework, robust monitoring arrangements and agencies working well together with the expertise to minimise the risks posed by sex offenders. 31 of the 33 recommendations have been implemented. I note that only 9 were implemented before 10 May 2007 and 22 have been delivered since then. On 11 November 2010, I advised that we are unable to implement recommendation 20 as it is not ECHR compliant. Work is ongoing in the one outstanding recommendation, number 12. More generally, we have introduced a number of changes to enhance the measures available for the management of sex offenders and those posing a risk of sexual harm. We recently legislated to strengthen Scotland's sexual offences prevention order and risk of sexual harm order regimes, and has also introduced regulations which tightened the notification period requirements in relation to foreign travel and periodic notification for homeless registered sex offenders. We have also consulted on options to develop the use of electronic monitoring, including its use for sex offenders, and analysis of the responses is underway.
Paul Martin.
Presiding Officer, of course, recommendation number 20 refers to the requirement being placed on registered sex offenders, a recommendation from the committee that they should disclose the information of the registered sex offenders during the housing application process. The Minister advises that he has received the ECHR legal guidance on this matter. I wonder if he would be willing to provide this information in public.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I've provided the information. It's not ECHR compliant. The member is well aware that government legal advice is not normally published. This is a matter that is, as I say, made clear. What we have set to do is sought to ensure that we deal with matters in other ways, which is why changes have been made and that the courts now have powers, whether in terms of disposal, whether in terms of sexual offence prevention orders, to make sure that we do have notification, because we are aware that there are difficulties in terms of keeping track in individuals. But government legal advice is a matter that Mr Martin well knows of, is not normally routinely published, but we are, as I say, quite clear that the advice is that it is not ECHR compliant, and on that basis, with regret, we have been unable to implement it. But we have, though, sought to make sure that the issues raised by Professor Irving are dealt with in other ways and our communities are given that appropriate protection.
Margaret Mitchell.
Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that in the event of sex offenders on the Sex Offenders Register breaching the register conditions by failing to report to a police station or ensuring their whereabouts are known, then in that event the right to anonymity should be lost?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think these were matters for the police. If people do seek to avoid compliance with the regime, these matters I think we have to leave to police officers. There are times, I don't think any anonymity as such is given. Sometimes it's a matter for the pursuit by the police that going public would cause greater concern, would cause the person to evade detection and capture. So I think we should trust the authorities here to use their discretion when it's appropriate and advice has to be given that somebody is at large and the public should be aware, then that is done, and they should be conscious of that to make sure that the public are able to take appropriate arrangements. If it would jeopardise their apprehension, if it would jeopardise or call them to flee when they're closing in on them, then I think we should leave this as a matter to discretion of those officers who are involved in the investigation.
Question 4, Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Board.
Minister Rosanna Cunningham.
The Scottish Government has regular meetings with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and in fact my next such meeting with the SFRS Chair happens to be tomorrow.
Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Minister. That's great timing. Minister, I've met with the staff in the Edinburgh control room and they are deeply worried about the idea that they would relocate to another place if that control room was closed. They are also deeply worried that we would lose the expertise critical to the delivery of the high-quality standards of safety which are at the core of this service. When the Minister meets the Chair of the Rescue Service, will she raise the issue about the Edinburgh Control Room and its strategic position in Scotland, both in terms of safeguarding jobs, but crucially to ensure that we retain the safety and security which is at the heart of this service?
Minister.
When I meet with the Chair of the SFRS, typically our conversation encompasses all the current issues which are before the SFRS for consideration. And the member is probably aware, she may not be, that the next board meeting, which is on the 30th of January, is the board meeting at which a final decision will be made in respect of the control rooms. And the only fixed position that we are in at the moment is that a decision has been made to maintain and continue with the Johnson control room. At the moment, the remainder of the control room scenario means that Edinburgh is being considered along with Aberdeen, Inverness and Dundee, and it is the board that will make the decision, the final decision, but it will be made taking into account all considerations that are important, and that will no doubt include the ones that were raised by the member.
Mark Biaggi.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would also like to place on record my support for the continuing operation in the Edinburgh Fire Control Room. Does the Minister agree that when the board meets it should take into account all the representations, including those from the FBU reps that I have also met, which highlight issues such as the importance of Edinburgh already being the second largest and second busiest site, but also that the IT is very much up to date, and that there is no financial benefit due to closing due to the co-location with an operational and ongoing fire station?
Minister.
There's little I can add other than what I've already indicated, but can I reassure the member and indeed all other members here that all of these things are going to be taken into consideration by the board when it looks at how it will make that final determination, and the decision will be arrived at carefully, thoughtfully and with due care and regard in principle to the safety of the public going forward.
Question 5, Sandra White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how its city strategy provides additional support for local traders.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
The Cities Alliance is responsible for delivery of the city strategy and for developing opportunities for cities and their regions to collaborate and deliver investment to support growth and jobs. In parallel, the Government recognises that Scottish businesses are the drivers of sustainable economic growth, and we're committed to ensuring a supportive business environment. For example, we've removed or reduced taxation for 2 and 5 business premises, and from April this year we will expand Fresh Start business rates relief to a range of local traders, including pubs, hotels and restaurants.
Sandra White.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for that answer, and I appreciate the work that's being done. The Deputy First Minister will be aware of the news that all traders at Glasgow's Savoy Centre in my constituency in Glasgow have been told that they have 1 week to vacate their shops, causing understandable concern amongst traders faced with losing their livelihoods and anger that no discussion with the owners have taken place. What support can the Scottish Government offer these traders, and will the Deputy First Minister meet with me to discuss a way forward?
Cabinet Secretary.
I am aware of this situation, and I'm very saddened to hear that this important Glasgow landmark is at risk. We've been in contact this morning with KPMG, who are the proposed liquidators. They've confirmed that they're currently in discussion with InShop Centre Limited and InShop Starters Limited in an attempt to resolve the situation. I've asked officials to keep me informed of developments, and I'll provide Sandra White with an update as soon as I'm able to.
Gavin Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. With regards to the city strategy, what percentage of the city's investment fund remains unallocated?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm happy to write to the member and give him a breakdown of the city's investment fund that has been allocated and what is unallocated and what the allocated funds have been allocated to. The member will appreciate that the fund that we established is intended to be a catalyst fund. It's to fund some of the studies around the work that the Cities Alliance wants to engage itself in, and will be used to try to look at opportunities to lever in additional funding to cities and to their investment priorities. So I'm happy to send the member a detailed breakdown of that, and I'll accompany that with a summary of the work that the Cities Alliance has done to date and what its priorities are in the months to come.
Question 6, Mary Scanlon.
To ask the Scottish Government how many additional miles of the A9 between Perth and Inverness are on course to be dualled by December 2016.
Minister Keith Brown.
We are on course to have the first 4.6-mile section of dualling between Kincraig and already under construction by December 2016.
Mary Scanlon.
I thank the Minister for that answer. In the update to the Public Audit Committee on major capital projects this week, 2 sections of the A9 around 13 miles are in progress, and this will bring the total dualled sections of the A9 to around 43 miles. Given that Lunkerty to Burnham dualling is due to start in 2017, can I ask the Minister what is the timetable for the remaining 67 miles, and is it on course for completion in 2025?
Keith Brown.
Well, of course, we don't intend to dual the entire 67 plus 41 miles that's mentioned by Mary Scanlon. It's Inverness to Perth that we are proposing to dual, and we propose to do that by 2025. But I should say that 2 of the projects which we've already completed, Ballinloo Grade Separated Junction and the Helmsdale Single Carriageway, £9.7 million and £15 million, stands in stark contrast to the underinvestment of previous governments. And I would say the commitment we've made to a £3 billion upgrade dualling of the A9, the first government to do so, the biggest transport project by cost in the history of Scotland, stands in stark contrast to the lack of commitment of previous governments. And the main commitment the Conservatives have made, of course, is to spend £3 billion on a tram system for Edinburgh.
Question number 7, Duncan McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government when the Cabinet Secretary for Justice last met the Chief Constable of Police Scotland and what was discussed.
Cabinet Secretary Kenny McCaskill.
I met Sir Stephen House on Tuesday to discuss important issues around keeping people safe in Scotland and its communities.
Duncan McNeill.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware of the review of the incident and crime recording that was published by HM Inspectorate of Constabulary for Scotland in December 2013. It recommended that Police Scotland, in cooperation with the Scottish Government and others, review the definition of serious assault, which, as it stands, can result in serious assaults being recorded as common assaults. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with this recommendation, and will he work with others to ensure that we have an accurate picture of the number of serious assaults that take place in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, I think it's an important issue that the member raises, and I'm more than happy to ensure that government has its appropriate input. I did, in fact, although I met Sir Stephen House on Tuesday, I met with George Graham, HMIC, just yesterday, although that particular matter wasn't raised or discussed. But I think it is right that we do have to ensure that there's some commonality. Some of this relates to how legacy forces had been recording matters, and that's a matter where I think it's quite clear that HMIC's advice is being taken on board by Police Scotland, and I'll be more than happy to ensure that myself, or indeed through Sir Stephen House's office, the members kept it praised.
Question number 8, Graham Pearson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support it is providing to communities in East Ayrshire.
Minister Derek Mackay.
The Scottish Government provides a breadth of support to communities in East Ayrshire. It is the responsibility of the local authority and the Community Plan Partnership to support local communities and ensure that the resources they have available are directed according to local needs and circumstances. In 13-14, East Ayrshire Council are receiving a settlement of £229 million of funding through the local government settlement. East Ayrshire communities will also benefit from wider government investment, including, for example, transport, housing, health, justice, culture, sport and economic development.
Graham Pearson.
I'm grateful to the Minister for that answer. Is he able to share with me what actions have been decided by the government-appointed task force to ameliorate the worst outcomes arising from the open cast mines debacle affecting communities in East Ayrshire and likely to cost those communities more than £100 million to repair at this time?
Minister.
As the member will be aware, Mr Ewing has established the Scottish Coal Industry Task Force, and between the work going on there and the wider government strategies, we are doing our best to support communities in Ayrshire and elsewhere affected by those issues, and I'm more than happy to write to the member about the actions that are being undertaken.
Question 9, Anne McTaggart.
To ask the Scottish Government what additional measures it has put in place to support teachers in light of the recent concerns expressed by EIS members regarding the introduction of national 4 and 5 exams.
Briefly, if you can, Minister Alistair Allen.
Scottish Government, SQA, Education Scotland and other partners have put in place unprecedented levels of support to help teachers deliver the new qualifications. This will continue and be enhanced over this year. Further support, which will address some of the areas identified by EEIS members, was already being planned, and this includes early feedback to schools on assessment standards, additional SQA subject experts to provide CPD for teachers in priority subjects, and CFE leadership events in February and March for all secondary head teachers. We continue to listen to teachers to provide any help they need.
Briefly, Ms McTaggart.
Thank the Minister for that reply. Does the Minister intend to delay its introduction?
That was brief, Minister. As brief, please.
Well, I can be equally brief almost in response and say that the Government is not intending to delay CFE. The timetable for the implementation of CFE was agreed several years ago, and there is cross-party agreement on that. We will, however, be very open to providing all the support that is necessary to ensure that CFE is a success we all know it will be.
Thank you. We now move to First Ministers. Before I do so, can I just acknowledge the brevity shown